Hello all of you crisp packets floating on a breeze, I'm Jules from WhatCulture.com, the explosive force that leaves men quaking in their shoes and women weak at the knees. And yet today we're going to be talking about a different kind of bomb of sorts and look at video games that just couldn't stick the landing. Honestly, it must be such an absolute gut punch for a developer to put love and time into a title only to see it fail to hit targets or garner critical and mainstream negativity. And yet it happens much more than you might think. And even worse than this is when the games in questions actually review really well, tick all of the right boxes and seem on the surface to be the perfect experience, only for them to slump in the sales. So let's take a look today at the titles that looked like utter hot sauce but failed to cut the mustard. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games you didn't realise secretly bombed. Number 10, The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. Now looking at the entire franchise, you'd be forgiven for thinking that The Legend of Zelda was pretty much bulletproof, seeing as nearly every title has been loved the world over and over 109 million units of the collected games have made their way into our homes. And yet, there's one name that sticks out kind of like a crooked feather on an otherwise pristine cap, and that's 2011's Skyward Sword, which was not only the worst-selling 3D Zelda game of all time with a mere 3.6 million units shifted, but it's also one of the worst-selling mainline Zeldas in the series' history. And yet many assumed that the game had done absolute numbers, seeing as every critical outlet seemed to fawn over the game like it was their own firstborn. And the fact is that how could it not sell well? It's a Zelda game, right? Well, multiple issues with the title, such as Skyward Sword's insistence of a Motion Plus upgrade for the Wii controller, and the fact that it arrived very late in the Wii's life cycle definitely didn't help. Despite the Wii having an install base of around 95 million in 2011, Skyward Sword's sales were eclipsed by The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild in just 2 months, despite releasing on the other strange Nintendo bomb that was the Wii U and the newly launched Nintendo Switch simultaneously. So yeah, that's got a sting. Number 9, Batman: The Telltale series. For many, many years, it was simply accepted that Telltale Games was the studio that was too big and smart to fail. Their Walking Dead series was of course a stonking commercial hit, and considering the evidently low costs of producing their various episodic adventure games, it was almost a guarantee that they would make their money back hand over fist. But with Telltale's shock closure in 2018, the company's dire financial straits were finally laid bare, revealing that The Walking Dead's first season and Minecraft story mode were the only episodic titles to actually turn a profit. Given that they'd had numerous critically acclaimed and high-profile releases over the years, such as The Wolf Among Us and adaptations of big-name IPs like Game of Thrones, Borderlands, and especially Batman, it was truly jaw-dropping that they just flopped so thoroughly. But what proved particularly surprising was the revelation that Batman: The Telltale series was reportedly one of their biggest flops. It's just so shocking when you consider how beloved and supported that franchise usually is. But there we go. Number 8, Control. Remedy's Control was one of 2019's best reviewed games, to the extent of receiving a heap of Game of the Year nominations and being passionately championed by fans and critics in the year-end discussions. And yet, the game sold incredibly poorly, being eclipsed by the Dark Pictures' Man of Medan on the month of its release, which was a title with, let's just say, a lot less critical praise. The game itself did break even thanks to a modest budget of $30 million, nearly 10 of which was paid back immediately for the Epic Games exclusivity, but the mainstream market just didn't seem to know what to make of it, which is a real shame because, as anyone who's played it can attest, this is a title that really nailed its action spectacle and offered a brain-melting story that was just as fun to piece together as it was to find out yourself. At least if the rumours of Control heading to the Xbox Game Pass in the near future are true, they should be able to mitigate their losses somewhat. Fingers crossed. Number 7, the Resident Evil remake. Capcom's 2002 remake of their survival horror classic Resident Evil remains one of the most acclaimed games ever released for the GameCube. And while its legacy endures as one of the best video game remakes in history, it was also, rather surprisingly, a disappointing commercial dud during its original run. The problem was, unfortunately, that the GameCube had a very low install base, with the hardware's lifetime sales topping out at a paltry 21.74 million, placing a severely low ceiling on the game's commercial prospects. With just 1.42 million units sold, the remake was an acclaimed flop, which in conjunction with its follow-up Resident Evil 0 selling an even worse 1.25 million copies, promoted Capcom to take the franchise in a more action-centric direction for Resident Evil 4. And it's strange to think that we have a failure to thank for one of the most innovative games ever made, isn't it? But again, the low sales of Resi 4 thanks to the smaller market finally forced Capcom to port the game to PS2 and enjoy the rampant success that that mainstream console had to offer. There was at least a happy ending of sorts for Resident Evil's remake though, because itself was ported to the Wii in 2008 and then received a HD remaster in 2015, with the latter becoming Capcom's fastest selling digital title in history. However, before that point, it was pretty much like the speed of the zombies. Bit of a shambles. Number 6, Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. Though the Wolfenstein games have never been commercial juggernauts, there's been a fair assumption amongst the fans that they routinely perform well thanks to this loyal fan base, especially with 2014's The New Order and 2015's The Old Blood doing really well with both fans and critics. In fact, there was such a buzz around the series that when 2017's The New Colossus rolled around, people expected this to just be brilliant, to just be amazing, to be, well, in short, a Colossus itself. But Bethesda made the extremely ill-advised decision to release the game the same day as both Super Mario Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and also just a week before Call of Duty World War II. What are you playing at, lads? Give it a chance. As such, the new Colossus tanked throughout the holiday season with so much competition in its midst, and leaked sales data sadly seemed to confirm that this game was indeed a poor seller across all of the platforms that it was released on. But at least Bethesda have expressed commitment to the franchise with 2 spin-off games that were okay at best, but also another mainline sequel which will be coming to next-gen consoles. Number 5, Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars. Grand Theft Auto is one of the most commercially successful video game franchises in history, and most fans would quite understandably presume that anything with the GTA name on it would be gobbled up by giddy players. Except that is, apparently, for the series' handheld title Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars, which was originally released for the Nintendo DS in 2009 and PSP later that year. It received near universal critical acclaim and remains one of the best reviewed titles on either platform, and yet it sold less than 90,000 copies during its first 2 weeks of release in the US. Now granted, giving a GTA game a day one exclusive release on a Nintendo handheld probably wasn't the smartest move, though the game didn't fare any better when it landed on the PSP 7 months later, again failing to crack the sales charts. Still, this is the kind of hit that such an established developer can take, especially when you see that GTA 5 is still somehow, after all of these years of release, still in the sales charts. Madness. Number 4, Bayonetta. It's no secret that Platinum Games' Bayonetta 2 was a critically acclaimed commercial disaster upon release, and it was hamstrung by the Wii U's commercial struggles. I mean, seriously, the install base of the Wii U was pathetic. And yet despite this, and all of the re-releases that garnered modest but not gangbuster sales, a third Bayonetta is indeed in development. Although that is mainly down to Nintendo footing the bill for Switch exclusivity. Though well received and well reviewed by critics, the original Bayonetta barely cracked 2 million copies sold across the PS3 and Xbox 360, and was, by Platinum Games' own admission, a financial disappointment. Now, everyone who's played this game can confirm it's an exhilarating ride from start to finish, but for some reason, so many people passed it by. The game did at least enjoy a tidy sales boost when it finally hit PC in 2017, and now, with the 10th anniversary bundle with the almighty Vanquish, will get another boost. But in terms of sales power, it's never been more than a fine witch hair above being in the red. Number 3, Max Payne 2: The Fall of Max Payne. Much like Bayonetta, the Max Payne series enjoyed a far longer innings than it might have done if it was developed by a group with far less cash in their pockets. Though the groundbreaking 2001 original was a strong commercial success, the sequel, Max Payne 2: The Fall of Max Payne, was a baffling bust despite strong reviews and no major genre competition in its midst. As a result, publisher Rockstar Games' parent company Take-Two Interactive had to reforecast their entire finances for the following year, and the Max Payne franchise seemed to effectively be dead. But surprisingly though, a third game did finally release an almost entire decade later in 2012, and despite strong acclaim and seemingly solid sales, the colossal $105 million budget ultimately prevented it from becoming a commercial success. In fact, things were nearly a total disaster for the studio that worked on the game, as they were shut down due to the game not making back its investment. Luckily though, Rockstar offered the employees that were affected other jobs at other Rockstar studios, so at least that's something. Number 2, Death Stranding. Death Stranding was one of the most unique and admittedly divisive games of 2019, and despite this strong commercial track record of gaming auteur Hideo Kojima, it was still considered one of the most ambitious and risky projects of the entire generation. The early word seemed to suggest though that the gamble had paid off, with reports emerging that Death Stranding had sold incredibly well in Japan, where it landed the biggest debut of any new IP in this gaming generation. But sadly, this success wasn't replicated in most other territories, because despite strong initial sales in countries such as the UK, Death Stranding took a steep drop in subsequent weeks, with physical sales falling a shocking 71% in the second week in the UK alone. This was likely due to both the game's polarizing nature and one of the most stacked late-year periods in recent memory. The fact that Sony has been largely radio silent on the game's performance seems to suggest that it has performed well below expectations. Hopefully it won't deter them from supporting singular artists like Kojima in the future though, because seriously, that is the most important message of all of this. And number 1, Metroid: Samus Returns. Despite being one of Nintendo's flagship franchises, and as much as this will no doubt annoy fans of this franchise, Metroid has never been much of a seller. It is a critical darling and some of the best gaming going, but that doesn't always mean that it managed to shift units. Take for example Metroid: Samus Returns, which was announced for a 2017 release on the Nintendo 3DS. And remember that this is a platform with an install base of over 75 million. With this much scope, this should have been a surefire hit, right? Well, at last report, it's estimated that Samus Returns ended up only selling 600,000 units worldwide across physical and digital platforms, making it one of the worst-selling games in the franchise and an absolute commercial dud, at least by Nintendo standards. Given that this marks the third straight flop in a row for the Metroid series following Other M and the wretched Federation Force, Nintendo is surely crossing their fingers and toes for the upcoming Metroid Prime 4, because effectively that has to break the streak, otherwise the franchise might be in trouble. And that's not fun. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video games that were surprising bombs. Let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below, as well as any other titles that you would have added to this list. Are you shocked by this? I know that I was reading this a fair few times and just thinking, my God, really? Is that sold as bad as that? And it just sort of suggests as well that if these are the sort of franchises that we should be, championing, we should probably actually try and figure out a way of supporting them. I don't want to live in a world where there's not another Metroid. That actually really freaks me out in some very strange way. And like I was saying before with the auteur thing for Death Stranding, it's important that we support local, independent developers, or even people that have got great visions and want to do these huge bombastic things. But as with most things, it'll probably just boil down to the homogenous stuff every single year release, like your FIFAs and your Call of Duties. I'm bumming myself out. Let's not do that. Let's end on something positive. I hope that you are well, my friends, and I hope that you are treating yourself fairly, both mentally and physically. Remember, you deserve love, happiness, and success. We all do. Don't be a commercial dud like these guys. Go out there and absolutely smash it, you big ledge. You've got my support from day one. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. And if you'd like to do something else, you can check out my board game channel, Live and Let's Dice. You can tell wearing a t-shirt for Dungeons & Dragons because I'm a big nerd, baby. Go and see me over there. It'd be quite fun. But until then, take care of yourself and remember, you've been awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.